Now we will use a similar method to read in profile points for an airfoil that we will use to make a lofted surface for the wing and the tail and the fin. So first let's save another version of our Primi plane. This will be Primi plane 3, and we'll update the data file to match aircraft3.dat, and let's create that aircraft 3. So see, if I go into my data folder and go back into this directory editor, notice these grayed out files with the tilde at the end. Those are autosave files from Emacs, and a quick way to clean those up is simply type tilde when you are in the directory editor here, and they get marked for deletion. See the D's next to each one? And now to execute the deletion on all of those, type X for execute. And now see in the mini buffer, it's asking, do I want to delete 4 files? And I'll say yes. So that cleans up my tilde files. And now we can copy this aircraft2.dat with an uppercase C. Copy aircraft2.dat to aircraft3.dat. Pressing G in the directory editor, the DIRED mode, will update the directory listing, and it will sort alphabetically. So the more you work in Emacs, the more you realize that very rarely do you actually have to leave Emacs. Now let's go back to our Primi plane 3, and we will add an additional file name for the points data. We'll call it our points data file. We go back to the directory. That's an existing file that I pulled in. So similar to our data file path, we'll establish a points file path. So the points file path will be the same thing, except we're merging the points file name with the data folder. And if we take a look in this file, again, from the directory editor, you can simply press return on any of these files to visit the file itself. So that's another quick way to open a file through a directory editor. So this NACA 12 file, I downloaded from the internet, and the only thing I changed is I put a parenthesis at the beginning of the file and a parenthesis at the end. So now we can read it with a single call to read. Otherwise, we have to use a bit fancier code. If it's a simple text file, we would have to read it line by line and then piece it together, which is not difficult, but it's a bit more code than simply one call to a read function. And I put these 2 names that come at the beginning of the file in double quotes, so they will come in as strings. So with that in mind, let's go back to our code and have the idea that we can read in our points data, and this will be a simple with open file. Read in from the points file path, and that's it. So there's our points data list. Now let's extend our data object. So we have one central object that handles all the raw data for our application, and we'll pass in the points data as another input to this object. So remember, we're using parameters, and that simulates individually passing each key value pair from this data list in as an input slot. So we're doing that already. And now we'll add an additional input slots for the points data, and that'll be simply the points data list. And down below we add an input slot for points data. There's aircraft data, so we have all this stuff, and then finally it has the points data as well. And really this aircraft data object will not do anything else. Its only job is to provide a convenient location to refer to all this data without thinking about the files. And maybe in the future this data object could interface with, let's say, a relational database instead of actual files, and then you won't have to change any of your application code. Now let's take one more look at this. We have some computed slots here, and they're only used in one place. For example, the data list. If I search for data list, I find it only in 2 places, where we define it and then this other place where we use it. Now, it's not likely that we need that data list anywhere else. We have to question, is it worth really having a separate computed slot just for this? And I think as an alternative, we could simply take this expression, the with open file, and cut it. And again, Control Meta Space will select the whole expression. Control W will cut the expression. There's an even shorter way to cut an expression, which is Control Meta K. Control Meta K will cut the balanced expression beginning where the point is. So we Control Meta K it from there and just paste it directly here. That way we don't need a separate message for the data list. And the same thing with the points data list. Let's cut the expression there and just feed it directly into the object right here. So we've just saved ourselves 2 computed slots and cleaned up our code somewhat. Let's compile everything. We get warnings because we are redefining the same object names in a new file. But we're still getting one warning. Let's see what that is. That's a real warning. So we change buffers to the slime compilation buffer, and we have an undefined function reference, points file name. We're still referring to the points file name